Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of November 2019. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the air signs. We're going to look at Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. All right, let's start off with Libra. So the month has to begin with a discussion of the new moon that recently came through, which had a very big impact because this new moon in Scorpio, which landed in the second house for Libra sun or Libra rising, was in an exact opposition with the planet Uranus in the sign of Taurus. This activates your second and eighth house axis if you're a Libra, which means that there is a very dynamic tension happening around two houses this month that have a lot to do with money and finances. So most general signature for the month of November might have to do with money, business, finances, investments, expenditures or bills, debt, conversations about money and relationships. Those are the kinds of things that you want to pay attention to right now, specifically again, because the new moon, recent new moon on October 27th landed in your second house, the house of money and resources, opposite Uranus, the planet of rebellion, seeking greater freedom and also bringing with it disruptive changes in the eighth house, which, among other things, is a house that refers to debts and the money or resources of other people, perhaps even a spouse or a loved one. So changes happening in the financial houses this month are pronounced. Now, when we go forward from there, at the very beginning of the month, November 1st, Mercury is retrograde, turning retrograde in Scorpio in your second house. The nice thing about Mercury retrograde in the second house is that if you need to revisit unhealthy patterns from the past related to anything ranging from, money and bills and spending patterns, but also more broadly speaking to anything related to your material possessions, purging your closet, right? This is a Mercury retrograde in the second house type of activity. Mercury retrograde in the second house, revisiting eating or dietary patterns. Because the second house is also a house that has to do with not only what we possess, but the resources that we need materially to live and survive in the material world. So just a lot of thought and perhaps introspective work being done around those topics this month with Mercury retrograde. Now that turns direct on the 21st of November. So you got about 3 weeks of November dedicated to the potential changes and deeper introspective process around money and finances and material resources of any kind that Mercury retrograde is bringing. Watch for the reversals, delays, unexpected setbacks. Those things can come with Mercury retrograde too. And then on the 21st, when things turn forward, things get a little bit better. However, there is also on the 24th of the month, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but on the 24th of the month, let's go forward and I'll show you what that looks like actually so you can see it. All right. Here's the here's the 24th of the month. What you're going to see here is the planet Mars, also in your second house, just after Mercury's turned direct, opposing the planet Uranus in the eighth house. Now, that dynamic later in the month is a moment of catharsis and breakthrough, the need to confront or initiate aggressive, rebellious changes, and again, probably related to things like money, finances, resources, debts, expenditures, issues around money and relationships. This is a kind of breakthrough moment. It's pretty intense with Mars and Uranus. I'm going to watch for the unexpected things coming up around that time, maybe even a little shocking. And you want to be careful of not doing anything really impulsive around money or finances right at that time. So that's kind of the outlook for the month around Scorpio Taurus. You've also got the full moon on the 12th, landing in Taurus in your eighth house. That full moon bringing the attention over, it's an exalted full moon, which is not bad, right? Exalted full moon can bring beneficial things through other people, especially around money or finances, or just any kind of resources that other people might have or, lend to you or help you with. So the full moon in Taurus emphasizes that. It also emphasizes, sometimes a degree of full moon in Taurus in the eighth house can represent things like greed, the attempt to try to control or create security through an overly controlling attitude, and possibly also fear about the future that is kind of entwined with greed or possessiveness. Watch for those things around the full moon, which is on November 12th. So that's the Taurus Scorpio action for the month. Now, there are a few other major transits that are coming through that I think are also really big. For example, between the 1st and the 5th, let's go back in time now. Between the 1st and the 5th of the month, Mars in Libra is making a square to Pluto in Capricorn. That is pretty dynamic. Mars in your first house right now can basically, any planet in your first house is often a planet that you are taking on, that you're becoming, that you're sort of channeling. So you can think of Mars in the first, like right now, Mars in your first house, you're a peacemaker. You're about pleasure, harmony, beauty, balance, right? But Mars is in your house right now. So how are you dealing with that? The god of war, competition, aggression. That's not always easy for Librans. There's a reason that Mars is debilitated in Libra. On the other hand, Mars square to Pluto in the 4th house of home, family, roots, parents, land, your base or foundation in life. Mars square to Pluto is about upheaval, confrontation, some hard, deep inner work maybe around home and family matters the first like 5 days of the month or so. So keep your eye on that as well. Now, when we go forward from there, the next major transit outside of the ones I covered with through the Scorpio-Taurus axis, they're going to come through between like the 11th and the 16th, right around there, gives it kind of a broad orb, where Venus in Sagittarius is going to be square to Neptune in Pisces. Now, Venus-Neptune, generally speaking, is a pretty romantic energy. It's about the beautiful, the timeless, the subtle, the imaginal, the metaphorical or mythical, as well as, again, the romantic, the lovely, the sensual or sexual. So, you know, people generally love this transit for that reason. Like Venus-Neptune can be like, you know, a romantic date at a museum, you know, followed by a nice dinner. It has that kind of just like idyllic feeling to it. But remember that, as always, with anything contacting Neptune, we don't always see things clearly. You can get caught up in a kind of romantic fog around this time, especially around, you can also, one of the things that you have to watch for around this time between the 3rd and the 6th houses is going to be things like, how are you working through your conflicts that come up in your daily life? The 6th house was traditionally called the joy of Mars in the house of misfortune. And it often is just that daily grind of life that's not, like, there's a portion of every single day of our lives that's just not easy. It requires work that's just kind of like mundane and heavy. That's the 6th house traditionally. The Venus square to Neptune can be about escapism because we don't like the feeling of being bogged down by something. And that, so you got to be really careful of like the stress of life and trying to escape from it with this transit between the 11th and 16th. But otherwise, there's also this nice thing about humanitarianism and putting your beliefs, especially those that are good, true, and just pleasant things in general with Venus, and kind of putting them into action in the world. As the 6th house is sometimes also a place of sacrificial service or sacrificial work that we do. And so maybe something like that could be positive around that time as well. Now you go forward from there on the 16th, there's also, I think it's really kind of interesting, there's a grand water trine that comes through on the 16th. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. And this is a lot to do again with work and money. Your career house is highlighted with Moon in Cancer, hitting Mercury retrograde in the 2nd house of finances, and then hitting Neptune in the 6th house, a place, related to, again, that hard labor, the work, the daily grind, etc. So, you know, a bunch of watery planets connecting at this time. I would watch for a deeper, more contemplative, emotional mood, but it's here to say something to you. So whatever your emotional intelligence is trying to tell you right around the 16th of the month, probably connected to your work or to finance, is going to be really important to pay attention to. Now, finally, we go forward from there between the 21st and the 25th, a little bit more Venus action. You're going to see Venus and Jupiter getting together in Sagittarius in your 3rd house. And then right after that, you've got a new moon on the 26th in Sagittarius in your 3rd house. So altogether, those are the Those are the transits of the month in my book because, first of all, it's just really beautiful to see Venus and Jupiter in the evening sky. Like watch in the west after sunset. It'll be pretty beautiful to see Venus and Jupiter hanging out together. The other thing is that you've got these are the two benefics. Good fortune, and the houses traditionally of Venus and Jupiter are the house of good fortune and good spirit. Good fortune is the pleasant things in life that we enjoy. All of the things that make us happy, that make us feel good. Jupiter is the larger cosmic order that promotes peace and harmony and creates a working whole, feeling like you live in a meaningful, ordered cosmos. When the two of them get together, it's nice, right? It's pleasant, uplifting, visionary, inspiring, philosophical, spiritual, and beautiful. Like it has the feeling also of allies and benefactors coming into your life. So nice. In the third house, this could come through siblings. This could come through neighbors. This could be about something you're learning. This could come through media. The emphasis could be on your immediate environment, being filled with this kind of bustling, busy, but joyful, uplifting energy. And then the new moon on the 26th in Sagittarius tells us, yeah, this theme is going to continue well into December. So it's it's a pretty joyous, upbeat time, really. And you might also, you might be doing some healthy forgiving. Like when Venus and Jupiter gets together, I always notice that there's forgiveness in the air, just like the willingness to be charitable and generous with others. So watch for that as well. Okay, so that's Libra. Let's jump ahead now to Aquarius. Now, when we get to Aquarius, we got to bump back here to the beginning of the month. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about the new moon from late October 1st for you Aquarians out there. So the new moon fell in your 10th house, the house of career, opposite Uranus in the 4th house of home and family. So the dynamic tension of that new moon, everyone's feeling it a little bit different depending on what kind of chart you've got. 10th and 4th house, career, workplace, actions in the world that consume you, take up a lot of your time that maybe you're even known for in some public way, and Uranus. And Uranus in the 4th house, demanding revolution at the roots, home, family, parents, land, property. So tension between work and home, you could say in a very simple way, is the motor of this month's astrology for you. The changes are happening from the roots up. The work changes are coinciding with the need to shake things up at the foundation. That's it for Aquarians right now. Now, as that's happening, remember, Mercury's retrograde for 3 weeks, from November 1st all the way up to the 21st, indicating reversals, changes, revision, contemplation, introspection, all around work or calling in the world. In the ancient world, the 10th house was called praxis or karma, which means action. It means the things that you spend time doing. Sometimes that's your career. Other times we do a lot of, what do you do with the majority of your time? So when Mercury's retrograde in the 10th house, it's time to reflect on and maybe even revise or reconsider what you're doing with a lot of your time. It can also have something to do with administrative or organizational changes in the workplace. You want to pay attention to that. But it's deep. It's more emotionally intense. And there's a few other transits this month that are pouring through around the Scorpio-Taurus axis that we also have to pay attention to. For example, right after Mercury goes direct, we have Mars, again, coming into the early degrees of Scorpio. And just as it's doing so, Mars is making an opposition to Uranus in your 4th house. Now, that is a moment of catharsis, a moment of breakthrough, a moment of confrontation, a moment of needing to be very individualistic, to defy tradition or authority. And this tension is existing again between work in the world responsibilities or the feeling of having something that we have to do or we must do, and it's opposition to the planet Uranus, which also is demanding revolution around the home and family. So this is a very forceful, punctuated moment of this tension that the month began with in late October, the lunar month. Now, remember, Mercury turns direct on the 21st, and then right after on the 24th, Mars hits the opposition to Uranus. So watch for breakthroughs around work and family at that time. The other thing that's happening, we got to back up a little bit for, is on the 12th, there is a full moon. And the full moon for you is going to fall right into the sign of Taurus in your 4th house. So the full moon energy, you've got an exalted moon, brings good fortune, brings benefits around things related to home and family. Now, there might be revolution at the roots happening, in other words, but this full moon has a lot of promise for there to be something really pleasant and uplifting happening around home, family, roots, etc. So watch for that. That's a pretty sweet transit. All right. And it should balance out the intense, transformational, more confrontational energy of Scorpio planets heading through your 10th this month. So, okay, now outside of the Scorpio-Taurus axis, there's a few other things happening this month. Let's go back to the beginning of the month to check them out. So between like the 1st and the 5th, we have a square from Mars in Libra, which is in your 9th house, squaring Pluto in Capricorn in your 12th house. This is an important time to look at outsider ideas, controversial or taboo beliefs or teachings or teachers. This is a potential time for there to be doubt and more intense questioning about beliefs, whether they're political or spiritual or philosophical. And this is also a time where you have the potential to be somewhat reckless, because Mars square Pluto's in the 12th house, which is a house that sometimes has to do with lack of judgment. On the other hand, being concerned or wanting to be an advocate or standing up for someone who, you know, is disempowered, that's a 9th house, 12th house connection between Mars and Pluto as well. So, but it is a more combative energy. It's circling around that area of religion, higher education, academics, philosophy, the law, and it's hitting 12th house Pluto, which has a lot to do with the shadows, and not just our shadows, but collective shadows and so forth. So well, that energy is pretty intense the first 5 days of the month. Now, when you roll forward from there, the next major transit of the month, again, outside of that big Scorpio-Taurus action this month, is going to happen when the planet Venus in Sagittarius in your 11th house moves through square to Neptune in Pisces in your 2nd house. Now, again, Venus and Neptune get along, right? Venus is interested in love, harmony, beauty, sensuality. Venus is interested in things that are timeless, subtle, imaginative, mythic, romantic, etc. The shadow side is the vanity and lust that associated with Venus, or the delusional, fantasies of Neptune. So you want to pay attention to just this transit can open up the really beautiful, subtle, timeless, imaginative dimension, very romantic transit. It can also introduce us to delusion. So be careful of that. And around what? Venus in the 11th house, groups, friends, allies, benefactors, and 2nd house, money and finances. So is a friend asking you for money? Is a friend, trying to get you into some kind of get rich quick scheme? Is there a group that you're joining that appears amazing, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, but maybe is not all that it's cracked up to be? Are your friends inviting you, are you trying to seek after friends that are glamorous but toxic for you? Are you spending too much money? Are you trying to gain popularity in unhealthy ways? These are questions to ask around social life as well. So that transit comes through like the 11th to the 16th. Right on the 16th, another interesting transit that's coming through is a grand water trine. So check this out. On the 16th, you can see the moon in Cancer going to be connecting, and the 5th is the 15th, but you can see the moon starting to connect Mercury, Neptune, and the moon. And then the sun's in Scorpio as well. This is a really watery couple of days. Watch what your emotional intelligence is telling you around this time. That's what I'm telling everybody. For you, a lot to do with work, money, in general, the 6th, 10th, and 2nd houses. So, your emotional intelligence might just tip you off to something that needs to change right now. And this could also represent some kind of an emotional breakthrough, which, you may be on track to do in several different ways this month, especially considering, again, that Mars in Scorpio is going to oppose Uranus and Taurus. But I'm just looking at this time as like a more emotional, introspective time, maybe a little bit moody, but also, pay attention to what your emotional body is telling you right now. So it'll probably be giving you clear signs of where to focus. All right. Last but not least, when we go to the 21st to the 25th, then we get a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Like I said earlier, it's going to look really beautiful in the sky, so check it out. Sun's in Sagittarius, has just entered Sagittarius at that time. And then on the 26th, it is a new moon in Sagittarius as well, all focused on the 11th house. So first of all, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is just, you know, as astrological transits come, it's pretty awesome, right? You've got the goddess of good fortune and the planet of the higher order of the cosmos, the higher wholeness of the cosmos. So beauty and wholeness, expansion and enjoyment, pleasure and benefits, blessings and good fortune. Sounds pretty nice, right? And this is coming through the 11th house of groups, friends, allies, professional colleagues, networks of people. You might find some really great support, or you might be having a really nice time with friends, or doing something, or meeting people who are glamorous in some way. You know, a lot of benefits to be received there. What's the downside? Inflation, grandiosity, vanity, going too big with something. You know, everything that glitters is not gold, right? That kind of thing. So again, well, like Venus, Neptune earlier in the month, a little bit of that energy coming through. But I don't want you to look a gift horse in the mouth either. Like, appreciate and respect whatever the cosmos is sort of dealing you at this time. I always tell people it's harder to not get attached to the good transits and the bad ones, because we get who wants to be attached to the bad stuff, right? But it's easy to get attached to the good stuff. So just try to remain centered for all of it. Now, new moon in Sagittarius on the 26th, a focus for the next month ahead, the last full lunar month of 2019, on the house of groups, friends, allies, benefactors. Something really new is developing there right now. So thank you to all of you Aquarians. Let's move forward to, what do we got left? Gemini. Okay, now let's back it up to the beginning of the month so we're all set. Okay. Okay. So Gemini. All right, again, we got to start off November looking at the recent new moon in Scorpio. This fell in your 6th whole sign house, which is the house of work, sickness, service. Not a fun house, right? But it does indicate that, you know, recently you've been grinding on something. That's probably the case, because the new moon with a lot of Scorpio in that 6th house, Mars ruled. With Mars in the 5th house, maybe it's been something creative you've been working on, but a lot of hard work probably going on in the 6th house. Sometimes struggles with health, sometimes dealing with, you know, the 6th house, traditionally the house of bad fortune. It's a house that represents the nagging, difficult stuff of life that we have to deal with. You know, just misfortune. I go to the grocery store, I have to wait in a long line, 6th house. It's the stuff that perturbs, aggravates. It's the reality that we can't just have what we desire, that there are all sorts of unpleasant things that we have to deal with. That's the 6th. So an emphasis there for you right now with an opposition to Uranus in the 12th house. That doesn't make it any easier, because the revolution of Uranus is coming through a house that's often associated with our own shadows, our own tendency to be self-destructive, etc. So, you know, the need for a breakthrough right now is at hand, but you're working through something, you're slogging through something maybe. You have to be patient. You can't get the freedom that you're looking for through some kind of escapist or ultra rebellious or destructive measure. So just be careful about that. It's a month though where I want to be like, grind, get through it, you'll be okay. But don't, you know, just don't try to cheat out of a process that you really need to show up for. Now, the next major transit is Mercury retrograde, right? So Mercury in the 6th house adds a lot more of the same. Mercury in the 6th house, frankly, can have us revisiting problems from the past that we thought we were over. For example, if you're doing you've turned in a project, you've worked really hard, and someone's like, you got to go redo it. Okay, and it's going to involve a lot of work, Mercury retrograde in the 6th house. If there's some kind of delay or setback and it's a real pain in the butt, but you have to deal with it and it becomes the focus of your month, Mercury in the 6th house, like, it's not fun. On the other hand, if you are learning or studying something that has anything to do with sort of selfless service, which can be a part of the 6th house, then it could be a time where you're really learning something new or revising your way of thinking about something that in the past has been problematic. And now you're learning some kind of new strategy or approach to solve it or to work through it. So that's another option. Mercury turns direct on November 21st. A little ways into the month. I'm going to stop at the full moon this time first. So the full moon will land in your 12th house in Taurus. I think this is really interesting because it's an exalted full moon, which typically means it brings pleasing things. There's an emphasis on things that are enjoyable, uplifting, fortunate, etc. This is a full moon in Venus's sign. But it's in your 12th house. So you, again, some things that are pleasing in the 12th house is sometimes like a big bottle of alcohol that you don't really need. It's anything that looks pleasing but is actually self-destructive. Be careful of that. On the other hand, for there to be some kind of retreat, some kind of time spent in isolation or quietness, introspection, reflecting on things, and finding some kind of silver lining, some, resetting, recharging your battery, so to speak. Maybe the moon in the 12th house is some kind of silver lining. If you've been dealing with a lot of stress and troubles, some good news comes along. The full moon could bring, in other words, some kind of uplifting moment within the process of the 6th house, 12th house grind that you're in this month. I think you can look for that and be careful of the temptation to do something that feels like it would be really stabilizing and nice and pleasant, but might be actually taking you off course a little bit. That's around November 12th. Then on the 24th of the month, check this out, right? On the 24th of the month, the big news is that, whoops, let me back in Gemini here. On the 24th, Mars in the sign of Scorpio is opposing Uranus across your 6th and 12th house axis, right? More fun. This is a moment where there's a breakthrough available to you. There is also the potential for a breakdown and a serious disruptive breakdown. So you want to be careful. If you are aggressive, if you aren't getting the message, if you're trying to pound through something, some kind of obstacle or difficulty, if you're being cavalier or defiant, too rebellious, if you're trying to basically shrug off some kind of inner work that you need to do right now, this one will probably bite you in the butt. But on the other hand, this is a moment where, if you need to, it's like that last leg of a race where you need to dig deep and kind of get one more wind in you, so getting a second, a third wind, breaking through the barriers or obstacles, pushing through difficulty with kind of noble, patient, hard work, but experiencing some kind of breakthrough and lift, that could be there too. Would make sense since Mercury's just turned direct on the 21st at this point, and this is again on the 24th. But you do want to be careful about this kind of reckless quality with Mars opposite Uranus on the 24th. So it's a challenging month for Geminis, honestly. But there is some good news. The good news circles around the planet Venus. Venus is having a nice month for you. Let's check that out. So we go back earlier in the month, between the 11th and the 16th or thereabouts. Actually, wait. We need to back up before we'll get to Venus in a second. I almost skipped Mars. Mars is in the first 5 days of the month. We need to visit that really quick, actually. So let's do that. Sorry. Okay, so Venus is good news, though, I promise. So Mars is in your 5th house in, whoops. I am just all kinds of messed up here. Let's go back. Get down into the 3rd. There we go. All right. Now, Mars in your 5th house, the first 5 days of the month. Other transits to think about this month other than the Scorpio and Taurus axis in your chart. Yeah, that's going to be your 5th house and 8th house axis as Mars in Libra squares Pluto and Capricorn. Now, the 5th house is a house of good fortune, right? The 8th house, that's a complicated house. It's called the Gate of Hades. And it's a place that is associated with anything ranging from death, debts, to the fortune or riches of others that somehow bless or benefit you. It is a house where if something is good is going to happen, then it's going to come through the experiences with things like fear or loss or even death. So it's a heavier house, right? So how do you combine those two houses when you have Mars, the god of war, in a house associated with pleasant, beautiful things like sexuality, creativity, the arts, beauty, recreation, a nice dinner out? These are all things traditionally associated with the 5th house. Well, first of all, your pleasure this month will possibly be a real learning ground for you. Where you seek pleasure, where you seek joy, where you seek happiness, there might be some potentially sort of inappropriate dealings this month. Like this would be a signal potentially of an affair or a triangulation situation or something that's really complicated around sexuality or pleasure. doing something that's a little bit reckless or hedonistic. You're going to be really careful of all that stuff, sort of doing a dance with the devil because it looks fun or sexy. So be careful of that. On the other hand, this could be a moment where, you're doing things that are just a little edgier and receiving a lot of pleasure from them or benefit from them. For example, like this is kind of like the picture of like the tango or going salsa dancing, and it's sort of sexual and erotic. Could be something like that as well. The creative energy is there. It's a Mars Pluto from Libra to Capricorn to be very productive for you. If you're trying to, if you're an artist and you're trying to work in something that's a little edgy into a piece of art, or you're taking on an aesthetic that's a little heavier, that could be the case. All right, so that's the 1st through the 5th, this square that's coming through. Now let's get to Venus. So between like the 12th and the 15th, the other thing that's really, or the 11th and the 16th, I should say, is Venus in your 7th house of love and relationships square to Neptune in the 10th house, which is the house of career. So that's pretty awesome because first of all, Venus and Neptune, you're talking about the romantic, the sensual, the creative, the artistic, harmony, love, relationships, and Neptune, the timeless, imaginative, formless, and subtle, the mythic, the spiritual, the transcendental. So a really romantic energy pouring through the house of relationships right now, but maybe some connection to your career as well. Are there positive connections being made at work? Are you falling in love at work? Is there some kind of creative collaboration that's really sort of beautiful and inspiring? The other thing you have to be careful for is, of course, getting captured by the glamour, allure, and, illusion or fantasy of Neptune, Venus right at this time. That's like the 11th through the 16th. Then later in the month, between the 21st and the 25th, I really like this one, of course, as well, because this is Venus and Jupiter getting together in your 2nd house, in your 7th house of relationships. Venus, the goddess of, again, all pleasant things, all beautiful things. Jupiter, the picture of moral goodness, order, and wholeness in the universe. Looks pretty good around, romantic relationships or even creative collaborations or business partnerships. Some blessings coming in around that time in abundance. At the same time, people who have a lot of charisma entering your life might be trying to sell you on something. Maybe it's not a good thing. Potential for being enamored by fame or being enamored by someone or something that's big and grand, or someone paying attention to you and admiring you that has a lot of power or clout, or even someone that's really important to you that you never thought, well, I didn't think they'd ever pay attention to me. So, but I think the good news here is the potential for real benefits, expansion, growth, and blessings around relationships between like the 21st and the 25th. And then on the 26th, we've got a new moon in Sagittarius in your 7th house saying, hey, there is a seed of something new being planted right now in the house of relationships. It's going to grow through the end of the year. So a lot of energy being placed on the realm of relationships at the end of the month. All right, that's what I've got for you, air signs. I hope that this was interesting. Thanks for listening. Please leave your comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear how these transits play out. Remember to revisit these transits throughout the month. Otherwise, you'll forget them. It's nice to revisit them. And yeah, we'll be back for December's astrology soon enough. Take care, everyone. Bye.